So this is 2 steps to stop overeating, over drinking, overworking, over scrolling, whatever it is that you know that you are overdoing. And you define what that means for you. Like, how do you know when it's too much? You just decide this is more than I'd like to do. So if you are feeling the effects of some of your overdoing, whatever it is that you're overdoing, and you're really wanting to take more control over that, I'm going to share 2 tips to help you do that. So the teaching is going to be about 10 minutes, and then I will open it up to coach you and answer questions on whatever you have questions on based on the teaching, and we'll take it from there. So if you don't know me, I am a yoga teacher and a life coach for yogis. And I like to combine my background in yoga, Ayurveda, Buddhism with my background in psychology, life coaching, and habit change science. So I think it's really important to understand, why do we overdo in the first place? And we always want to get to the root cause. It's not just about changing the behavior. Part of changing the behavior is understanding why it's happening in the first place. So there are 5 driving motivators that I have uncovered that are the reason why we overdo. So those 5 things are seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, conserving energy, being liked or avoiding rejection, and being right. So I'll break each one of those down. And as humans, overall, these are all there to help us survive, but not necessarily thrive. So to seek pleasure, what that looks like is, that's why we indulge in these behaviors, because whether we are eating or drinking or scrolling or even working, those behaviors give us a sense of pleasure. There is the dopamine is the reward hormone, the pleasure hormone, which we get when we do those, when we can like check something off the list, when we scroll. All that stuff is designed to give us pleasure. So it's no wonder that we are engaging in those behaviors, because they feel good. And we are designed to engage in things that bring us pleasure, because we are, if eating wasn't pleasurable or sex wasn't pleasurable, we would not continue as a human species. So that's why that's there. Step 2, or the second driving motivator, is avoiding pain. And this, if you think kind of back in evolution times, this is like physical pain, like the pain of hunger or the pain of being cold or too hot. And that motivated us to protect ourselves so that we would survive. And even the emotional pain of like stress, a stressful event like a lion or a tiger or something coming at us, that helped us fight, flight, or freeze. But nowadays, all the lions and tigers are pretty much just coming from our thoughts. So we're experiencing the stress, the anxiety, or the anger, the bitterness, whatever it is, whatever uncomfortable emotion we're experiencing, and we want to run away from that, because that's how we're hardwired. The third motivator is our desire to conserve energy. And if you think back thousands of years, it took a lot of effort simply to survive, to be able to hunt and gather and build everything from scratch. And our bodies are very good at finding ways to be more efficient. And this is why we create habits so quickly. If we find pleasure in an easy way, like just grabbing our phone or grabbing something to eat, our body remembers that, okay, this gives us that dose of pleasure that we're after, and it's so easy, let's just make that a habit. And the same goes with our thinking. We develop thinking habits that tend to perpetuate themselves, because we start thinking something, and then our brain creates a neural pathway, and then our brain just more easily falls into that habit. And the fourth one is being liked. So we are tribal creatures, and thousands of years ago, if we were kicked out of the tribe, that literally meant death. Nowadays, we still have a lot of that same desire to want to avoid rejection and do what everyone else is doing, feel like we're part of the tribe, part of the community. But unfortunately, now it looks like peer pressure, or it looks like people pleasing. So I have clients that they tend to maybe eat things they don't want to eat because they don't want to make other people uncomfortable, or they're afraid of how other people will see them. And then the last one is being right. So again, think back, evolutionary, the need to be right helped us survive. Like, we needed to be right about what plants were poisonous or where wild animals like to hide. And so now we have to feel that sense of certainty, and that sense of like, we know where the danger is so we can avoid it. But now that looks like us holding on to beliefs about ourselves and identities that perpetuate themselves. For example, something I hear a lot is, well, I'm just not good at being consistent. And we believe that about ourselves. So we keep reinforcing that belief, and we keep finding evidence for that belief, and we keep telling ourselves that belief, and we keep proving it true. And this also goes for when we justify some of our behaviors. Well, I deserve it. I deserve to have a glass of wine after a long, hard day. Or, I work really hard. Or, this makes me happy. And this is the only thing that I have in my life that makes me happy. So we want to be right about our reasons for overdoing whatever behavior we're doing. So I wanted to share these reasons because we shame ourselves for a lot of these behaviors. We see that we are either, overdoing something, overeating, over drinking, over scrolling, and then we make it mean something like that. There's something wrong with us. I must be fundamentally flawed because I'm doing this behavior that I know is not good for me. But the truth is, you're human and you are hardwired to do that. But once we can bring awareness to it, then we can change it. So here are the 2 steps. Step 1, create a protocol. Step 2, befriend your uncomfortable emotions. So step 1 is really about making a clearly defined decision about how much, if any, you want to consume of whatever you feel like you're overdoing. For example, I have a client who was drinking 3 glasses of wine every single day, and she realized this is more than she wanted to drink. And so her first step is, I'm going to cut down to 2 glasses of wine and take 1 day off. And that's just her first step. And, then maybe she'll continue to cut down. But having it very clearly defined, our brain likes direction. And if we say things like, I'm going to cut down, our brain doesn't really know what to do with that information. It's like the lines are too blurry. So we have to decide on purpose, what am I doing? And I have another client that's, no sugar except for 1 exception a week. So when you have crossed the line into the overdoing it part. So that's step 1, is simply making a decision of what you want to do that is clearly defined. Step 2 is following that protocol, right? That's the hard part for most of us. And this requires that we change our relationship to our uncomfortable emotions. Because as we discussed before, uncomfortable emotions are uncomfortable, and we're hardwired to move away from anything that feels uncomfortable. So often when we are engaging in the overdrinking, overeating, overworking, we're running away from a feeling that we don't want to experience. Either we're feeling stressed, or we're feeling anxious, or we're feeling bored, or we're feeling pressured, or whatever it is that we're reacting to. And we have this uncomfortable feeling, and our primitive brain is like, run the other direction. And it's so easy to pick up our phone, or to go to the kitchen, or to pour a glass of wine. It's these quick fix, instant forms of gratification that are so easily accessible, and they're very culturally, culturally accepted. So that's what everyone's doing. That's what we're doing. It's right here. It's available, and it works in the moment. So there is something else that we need to understand about humans, is that the more you are exposed to something, the more you like it. And this is in psychology called the mere exposure effect. So one of the things that we haven't ever been taught as humans is how to be with these uncomfortable emotions, which are an inevitable part of being human. There is no escaping them. 50% of the time, we're going to be experiencing emotions that we would prefer not to. So if we just accept that fact, then it's like, okay, I don't want to live my life constantly distracting myself 50% of the time. So if we can actually expose ourselves on purpose to these feelings and change how we're feeling about them, thinking about them, reacting to them, engaging with them, then that changes everything. So I want you to think about as if you had a family member that was going to come stay with you indefinitely. And there was no escaping that. They were going to be in your house, whether you like it or not. And in general, you have this feeling where you're just like not connecting with them. They make you a little bit uncomfortable. You don't really want to be in the same room. So they're in the kitchen and you go to your room, and they're in the living room and you go to the kitchen. So this is kind of like this family member is a representation of your uncomfortable emotions. It's like you keep wanting to run the other way, like go in a different place, like escape them. But the thing is, like, you never get to know this person, and we're not exposing ourselves. So we never get a chance to be curious about who they are and see if there's any points of, something that we can get interested in them about. So when we think about exposing ourselves on purpose to something that's uncomfortable, it can feel like, oh, why would I want to do that? That sounds terrible. And the reason why I thought about this analogy, because I want you to think of it as possibly being a pleasurable experience. Because when you are in your body and present in your moment-to-moment experience, there is an inherent pleasure in that, even if it's slightly uncomfortable. And if you exercise, it's like, that's kind of what we're doing. We're like exposing ourselves to something uncomfortable on purpose. And there's some pleasure in that challenge. Like, we're up for it. We're like, bring it on. I'm like willing to do this hard thing. And there's even a little bit of fun in it. So can you think about befriending your uncomfortable emotions and hanging out with them like you would this family member, exposing yourself to them on purpose so that you can maybe start to like them more, and being willing to be interested and be curious. Okay, what's happening here? What is this feeling? What does it feel like in my body? Why is it there? What am I thinking that's creating this feeling? And in this way, instead of running to another room and escaping and distracting ourselves from these emotions, we can actually start to move towards them. And in moving towards them, we don't engage in these behaviors that then we, create their own negative consequences and effects, these effects in our lives that we don't want, these results of whether it's affecting our health or our well-being or our relationships or whatever we see that, these consequences of these overdoing behaviors are creating in our lives. So let's recap. The 5 reasons why we overdo is because we're hardwired to seek pleasure, avoid pain, conserve energy, be liked, and be right. So the 2 ways that we can overcome this innate tendency to do that and go into these numbing and escapism and self-soothing behaviors is to decide on purpose what we want to do. How much do we want to consume? How much do we want to drink, eat, work, scroll, whatever it is? Step 2, in order to honor your word, to be in integrity with your plan, you need to change your relationship with your uncomfortable emotions and actually befriend them. Move towards them. Allow them on purpose, feel them, get curious about them, explore them, sit and hang out in the same room with them. And that will give you so much sense of power and control and agency over your behaviors.